Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast with your host Dan and my usual fabulous co-host Rob.
Good evening.
Gonna be running for probably around about an hour and a half today, just still experimenting with length. Last week I think the hour worked. Still not a big fan of the 2 hour for other platform for YouTube. But
Mm.
we'll be definitely looking at around about an hour and a half. Probably, I would think, as a future thing as well. But we've got a few things to talk about this week. Um, if I sound particularly croaky, I've been ill, so I apologise if I sound off. I will push through, I will endure, and we will talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
We'll do his best. Sadly, I'm not a cleric or a druid, so no less a restoration for you.
I'll pray to the Morning Lord. The Morning Lord will heal me. But yes, we will. We've got some things to talk about, and we'll get started with our one of our favourite topics, one topic we talked about in the previous 2 episodes as well, and that is spell of the week.
Mm. I feel like we should get a little jingle for the spell of the week at some point. That'd be good. But so my spell this week is. If you've seen the first 2 episodes by now, you know that I have a bit of a thing for warlocks, and it is a warlock spell named Hunger of Hadar. It's a level 3 spell, so a little bit of a lower level than my previous 2 choices. But I've been playing through Baldur's Gate, and naturally I've been playing a warlock. So I've been playing at a little bit of a lower level than I'm used to, as the warlock character I play most is level, I believe level 13 now in their campaign. So we'll see how long that lasts. But so I've not used this spell in quite some time, and then getting to use it again as a level 5 warlock was quite nice. It reminded me of how good the spell can be, how good it can combo. Um, what you will do as casting the spell, it is a concentration spell. You open a gateway to the dark between the stars, says the flavor text. The region infested, which is a 20 feet radius sphere, so it's a 40-foot diameter sphere, which is a nice big area of effect. It becomes a region infected with unknown horrors. Blackness and bitter cold appears, centered on the point within range, lasting for the duration. The void is filled with a cacophony of soft whispers and slurping noises that can be heard up to 30 feet away. No light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area, and creatures fully within it are blinded. So there's a reason that I like this. Even without the damage the spell causes, blinding everything in a 40-foot sphere is pretty tasty. As a warlock that can commonly, quite popularly, will take the warlock invocation, the upgrade you get as one of your levels up, where you get to choose many various options to have Devil Sight, which gives you 120 feet of dark vision that can see into magical darkness. I mean, the rest of your party might not be able to do too good a job of seeing into it, but you should still be able to function fine. It's very good for battlefield control, just putting a massive spot of blinding darkness in an area. As you would expect, typically it prompts things to run outwards of that area, which means that you can then set up other characters, or other characters can set up mechanisms, spell effects, whatever they want to do um, to wait for them to run out of it. But while they're in there, it will deal 2 instances of damage, which is one of the other reasons I really like it. They're not huge amounts of damage, but the void creates a warp in the fabric of space, and the area is difficult terrain, so they will stay in there for longer. Any creature that starts its turn in the area takes 2d6 cold damage. No test, no saving throw, no rolls to do this, just straight up 2d6 cold damage, and any creature that ends its turn in the area must succeed on a dexterity saving throw and take 2d6 acid damage as milky, otherworldly tentacles rub up and caress against it. So you get a guaranteed 2d6 cold
Mm-hmm.
damage, and then you might get an extra 2d6 um, acid damage. Pardon me, neither of those elements are widely resisted. I think cold is in the middle of the Excel sheet of resistances, but
Mm,
it's
mm,
resisted by some things. It's not common though.
no.
So you've got quite a good amount of damage there, a maximum damage of 24, um, minimum of I suppose 4. But realistically, for me, it's the control that it gives you. I'm brought back to a memory in a campaign that I play my current warlock in
Yeah.
many much time ago. Many time ago. I can't
Many
speak
moons
English.
ago.
It helps. Many years ago, actually. I did this to funnel a band of orcs. I think there's probably about 10 or so of them ranged against us um, in some sort of jungle slash forest type area. And the wizard created wall of fire just beyond the darkness. So they were blinded. They had no idea that there was a nice big area of flame ready to receive them. And then after that, on the other side on the safe side of the fire, we had the melee orientated characters just waiting with prepared actions, ready to viciously attack anything that
Out,
leapt out of the flames
out
and
of the
lived.
darkness into the fire.
Pretty much, yeah, through the fire and the flames, so they say. It's it was a very satisfying bit of teamwork, shall we say?
Yeah.
And I think that the spell quite naturally creates um, that kind of interaction with other players. And then on top of it, going back to what I said, the creatures are blinded, but if you can see them in the darkness, that means you have advantage to hit them.
Mm.
So if a warlock has devil sight, or anybody had taken the feat to get a free warlock invocation and chosen devil sight, because that's quite popular too, um, they can just rattle away with arrows, eldritch blasts, whatever it is you want to do with advantage. Hopefully, get some nice juicy crits.
It's a good use of the limited spell slots that warlocks do have. I highly recommend it, especially because I love any spell that is exclusive to a
Yes.
class, because it's often it's made with that class in mind and is therefore going to be very specific for that class. So you obviously Hunger of Hadar, Eldritch Blast for your warlocks, and then you've got your bards with their vicious mockery and dissonant whispers.
Mm, yeah,
Um,
it really is full of flavor in that respect. It's just so like on theme,
mm,
especially if you're playing what I was and still are playing a great old one warlock who's made a pact with an eldritch being, um, summoning a small gateway to the cosmos is definitely something that feels good.
it feels appropriate flavor.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good spell. Not played a warlock, believe it or not.
Sacrilege.
With hmm?
Sacrilege.
Sacrilege. Well, it's mostly because it, I think when I first started getting into D&D, it had a certain stereotype to it that I wasn't. It was the edgy class to me, and I was like, I don't really want to play the edgy class.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, of course you've talked me around. Like, I do want to play Warlock at some point. Um,
That's, the edgy ones play the Eldritch Warlock, Hexblade Warlock, sorry, I should say, multi-class with Paladin or Rogue. That's the edgy combo.
you got to wonder how many Warlocks though have this sort of dark and twisted and tragic backstories that have tied into their packs. Uh, that's there's probably a good few with dead parents, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta give it
but
to
not
you on
all.
that one again. Playing the curtain wall that you're playing in my campaign. No tragic backstory, really. Like little hint of tragedy, but I wouldn't even call it tragedy. More like just sadness.
Yeah, a little bit of resent for his family as well,
Mm.
and more just like, oh, that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, we've started a campaign now with no dead parents. I don't think all living parents to some degree. Like Fitz doesn't know
Yeah, I
his
suppose.
mum, but like everyone else has got like living parents.
Mm.
Whether they like them or not is a different thing. um,
Yeah,
but all living families and parents, and it's interesting because it gives me a lot to play with if I do want to amp things up in a certain direction.
I think Vigil might say his parents are dead to him, but they are very much alive still.
Yes, to
From
the
what
uh, to the
from what I know.
anarchist. Yes, to his and his rich parents.
Mm.
But yes, back to Hunger of Hadar. I do agree. It's well, the appropriate tags on it on D&D Beyond, right? So damage and control. That
Yeah,
explains pretty
for
much
sure.
what it is. I would also, but it's got utility use as well, much like the level one darkness, because it's darkness with damage. It's kind of what it is.
It's a
Um,
bigger area as well. Darkness has a weird, if I remember, I've not looked at the darkness spell in quite some time,
Only
but
experienced it via the Baldur's Gate 3. So I can remember. I can remember. I haven't looked up. I never usually take it.
I think darkness has the weird weakness where if some magical light interacts with it, the darkness is dispelled.
Hmm.
Whereas this has the nice little text, no light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area. So it's just like, nah, your cleric with light, that's what they can do.
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's quite fairly balanced in that
Yeah,
obviously you're going to take 2d6 if you start your turn there.
yeah,
It's going to happen. And if you're that's unless you're playing a character that is maybe not particularly strategically minded, you're going to place it on some enemies to start with. So
yeah,
you're guaranteeing some 2d6 there. Obviously, the second 2d6 isn't guaranteed, and I think that's the balance with it. Is it's not like a lot of spells where you take so much damage or half on a save. It doesn't have the half on a save.
yeah.
But you are getting the guaranteed 2d6 without, as long as they start their turn, they're going to move, and after that initial casting of the spell and that first round, first round, the enemies aren't going to go and stand in it willingly
No,
unless they have no choice. They're
that's the best use of it in situations where you can bottleneck, or like if you were in some sort of cave system and
Oh yeah, if you can
things
get a good
don't have many places to go.
if you can get a good doorway, you stick it on the person that comes. Well, you let your wizard or your other spellcaster hold person, keep that person in that doorway so they're blocking it. Hunger of Adar. Yeah, you're causing some trouble there.
Yeah, for sure.
But that yeah, it's a good warlock spell. We'll give it that. Uh, so we go on to my spell. My spell of the week has a place in my heart for many a reason. I will bring it up. I know you've already got it up, but I will bring it up on my screen as well. But it has a fond place in my heart because it was particularly useful for me in the past, and
Mm,
that is Leomund's tiny hut.
it's a great spell.
It is a lovely spell, and if you've watched any sort of online D&D games, I'm sure you've seen many a wizard use it. It pretty much becomes the party's tent,
Yeah,
impenetrable tent. Um, but I'll read the description just a bit so that people listening can get a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about with Leomund's tiny hut. So, with a casting time of 1 minute, it's a 10-foot radius immobile dome of force. It springs into existence around and above you and remains stationary for the duration. The spell ends if you leave its area. 9 creatures of medium size or smaller can fit inside the dome with you. The spell fails if the area includes a larger creature or more than 9 creatures. It goes on about they can move around and things like that. But all other creatures and objects are barred from passing through it. Spells and other magical effects can extend through the dome or be cast through it. And the atmosphere inside is lovely. And the spell ends essentially when you after 8 hours, and you can choose kind of the the interior light, and you can choose the general color of the actual dome itself. I always
Yeah.
went for something a little kind of to camouflage wherever the party was camping. It's a third level, much like Hunger of Hadar.
Mm,
And similar to that, it doesn't actually require. It does require material components, but nothing that's going to cost you. So it's something that you can use your arcane focus, or yeah, it'll be your arcane focus, or the Twilight
Coupon and
Domains can
pouch.
do it. So I guess Holy Symbol too.
Yeah. When I played a Twilight Cleric quite briefly, I used it on that. 8 hours, nice and
Convenient.
convenient. That's the time you roughly will do a long rest for.
It is.
Some some races can do it in less time, but the group is not typically going to be made up of all of those races.
No, generally not.
Uh,
It's one where it's great for protecting you. There are ways to counter such thing. But it's pretty much an impenetrable dome
yeah.
that you can hide in and not have to worry too much about being thwacked during your long rest.
Mm,
Again, as I said, there's a few ways to get around it. There's obviously magic that you can use to counter it, and I guess it depends on how nice your DM is. But as it reads, you could also dig under it if you really wanted to as well.
I have seen people argue that. Um, I'm not sure what creator I remember seeing a while ago was talking about the use of, is it bullets or bullets?
Mhm.
The creatures from the Underdark that burrow, or anything else that burrows. Or it's definitely one of those spells where I think if the players use it a lot and they have an enemy that learns about them, is pursuing them or is involved in them with them quite a long period of time and sees them using it, that enemy may think about finding ways around it.
Mhm.
But these stereotypical creatures of the woods, the forests, wherever you might be, if random encounters that might come at you while you're having a long rest, bandits, goblins, orcs, undead creatures like that don't typically have the ability to get through the barrier. So it's
No.
a nice way to stay safe for most situations. Not every group of bandits has a wizard of level 5 or more that will have dispel magic or be able to hide in wait and counter it as you cast it. I suppose that's something
Mhm.
you could do.
Mhm.
I think one thing that I would like to do to players that use it at some point is literally just dig a trench around it or something like that. Just something to, I don't know. I would just want to mess with them, not actually break it, but just like, or maybe if you were feeling particularly nasty, you could pile dead bodies up against it. If it was like a necromancer or something like that, I don't know. There are ways to mess with your players if they're using it a lot. That's for sure. But I think as a spell, it is fantastic. It's a ritual spell as well, isn't it? So
Mhm.
your wizard doesn't need to have it prepared, but other classes that can cast it, like your cleric, if it's Twilight Domain, doesn't need to worry too much about using a spell slot.
Mhm.
Just take an extra 10 minutes, so 11 minutes in total. I think there is that caveat that um, you're supposed to be stood in the area when it triggers, but it's not really that much of an issue. I've never
Yeah.
seen it become an issue.
No, I don't think it's an issue. But it's great as a player because you have the opportunity to worry less about things attacking you, and it can speed up the game and the a little bit. As a DM, it is just another puzzle to be solved, which is great as well. And yeah, there are stacks of spells that you could use that may have a longer casting time in the against your players in that sort of vicinity, or if you just want to do it, mess with the players in that vicinity, and you can get away with it because a lot of the time players are gonna kind of forget to take watch
Yeah.
when they've got Leomund's tiny heart up, and having been one of those players, it didn't result in anybody dying, but like I don't think so.
No, but it made a good fight.
It made some very interesting situations.
Yeah,
Uh,
some good intensity to the fact that uh, well, the quality of starting a fight with any group of adventurers halfway through their rest is that anybody wearing armor needs to take their armor off, otherwise they don't benefit from a long rest. So that paladin wearing full plate isn't going to have it on. Probably doesn't have too much dexterity anyway, so they're going to be very easy to hit as opposed to when they've got
mhm.
their like 18 AC full plate plus a shield. Um, Depending on how nasty the DM is, you could say that the wizard has their spellbook and arcane focus put away, so needs to take a round getting it out of their bag, or maybe not. But it's like you could depending on the flavor of the game being run at the table. If you were playing a game where you were quite cruel and all your players were on board with that, then there are certainly uses when your players are getting a little too comfortable
Yeah.
having that free long rest.
Uh, yeah, it's a great utility spell. It's not generally one that's going to be implemented during a combat encounter,
No.
unless you've got a lot of time beforehand to prep. You might, but you are going to be taking your wizard, or your bard or your twilight cleric out of the fight essentially by having them sit inside a tiny hut, Leomund's tiny hut. I guess if the situation calls for it, you might throw up. I know Critical Role did it once, but it's not something I would have necessarily thought was an urgent use case. But each to their own, I suppose. And they made good use of it.
What did they do?
They had the tiny hut prepared before they went to go and possibly annoy a very large white dragon.
Oh, okay.
And their wizard in campaign to obviously stayed within it. Where everyone else went off to do their to heist this dragon's hoard. And then when
Ah,
they run back to it, get inside it, and bites away, and then can't get in. I think then he did he then use like teleportation circle or something to get him out. I can't remember.
another spell that takes at least a minute to do so, like he's giving himself the safety of the area. Yeah, okay,
Mm.
that makes sense. I have seen. I really have no idea where I've seen this, but it was definitely um, another D&D based content creator, storyteller, something like that on YouTube, and I remember seeing someone telling a story about a time that they cast it from inside the belly of a purple worm, and
Right,
because
he
the
survived that
diameter
long.
is well that was I don't know, yeah, there's a bit of I think they were just allowing it for rule of cool. Maybe they had quite a
Mm.
generous DM, or they maybe they found some way to get around the minute casting, because you're not going to survive for a minute inside the stomach of a purple worm, let's be honest. But they allowed it, and a purple worm is not 20 foot wide, so it severed it in half, because it was met with the immovable barrier
It's like a bit like
There is
a.
definitely argument to be said
Mm.
that there, when you cast it, there is a creature of large or otherwise in the casting zone, therefore it fails. But
Yeah,
rule of cool,
rule of cool. Rule of cool. Yes, yes, I would agree. There's definitely spells that would do the same thing quicker. I think. Um, Global invulnerability, but again, higher level spell.
much higher level, yeah. I think Force Cage might work in a similar way, but
Hmm.
again, I think it might have that caveat that if you if you've got something too big in it, it gets pushed out.
Yeah, that it depends whether or not like the space within you counts as you. But then we're getting to a real like
We are.
physics question, aren't we?
We're getting to the point where the DM basically says, "I'll allow it" or "I won't allow it"
Yeah, yeah.
because of cool. So it's kind of one of
I
those
would
where
have
it's up.
gone, yes, that's really cool, let's do it. But it's only if they had a way to speed up the casting time, because otherwise, what, 10 rounds of acid damage? You no, you're probably not going to survive unless you're high level. Maybe you've got lots of hit points and you've got, I don't know, abjuration wizard. Maybe can
If you're a high level, then the purple worm's not going to pose a threat.
no, you've probably already dealt with it in another fashion.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Well,
So,
spells of the week. Hunger of Hadar, Leomund's Tiny Hut. We recommend both. Both
likewise.
are should be mainstays for your spellcasters, really. I guess your warlocks and your wizards, really. Is that my Discord beeping?
It was.
Hmm, ignore that. Uh, so we'll move on to the next subject, which the next topic of discussion is another weekly discussion topic, and that is Monsters of the Week, or Monster of the Week. I suppose monsters because we do present one each,
Yeah.
and as always, I'll hand it over to Rob for the first one.
So, yeah, my choice now. The last 2 weeks. Well, in fact, the last 2 weeks, I think both me and Dan have gone for some pretty high challenge rating creatures. I've done the opposite this week. It's only challenge rating 4, so it's still. I wouldn't recommend putting it against some level 1 players, but it's something you'd probably expect to find in maybe the first 5 levels of play, maybe a little bit after that for the flavour of it. It's an undead um, creature, and I've gone for the Banshee. Many different versions of banshees in popular folklore, but in D&D, it is fairly traditional, some sort of ghastly, ghostly creature that can scream really loud. So loud, in fact, that it can be fatal to hear it. I could probably list a couple of music choices, but um, it's a really interesting creature because it's easy to hit. It's not got huge amounts of HP. It's only got 12 armor class, so it's quite easy to hit. It's got 58 hit points if you take the average. You can roll it, and it's 13d8. It does fly, so it can present a challenge for your melee characters that way. They may have to think around a little bit. Um, and it does have damage resistances as it is a ghostly type undead, so the typical damage resistances will tend to apply. Immune to cold, necrotic, and poison, resistance to acid, fire, lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, or from non-magical attacks. Um, it's immune to most physical immunities like charmed, exhaustion, grappled, but it's also immune to a lot of other things like frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned. You can't prone it. It can't be restrained because it can um, use its incorporeal movement to get out of any restrictions or grapples you apply to it. But the real juicy part is that scream, the wail.
The
It
whale.
gets one a day. The banshee releases a mournful wail, provided that isn't in sunlight. The wail has no effect on constructs and undead. All of the creatures within 30 feet that can hear her must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw. On a failure, that creature drops to 0 hit points, and on a success, the creature takes 10 damage or 3d6 psychic damage, depending on if you're just taking the average or if you like to roll your damage. Now, you might be thinking, Constitution save, DC 13, that's quite easy to beat, and you would be right in assuming that. However, I have run this against just a single Banshee as a little bit of a fun optional fight that players in a one-shot could find many years ago in a mine shaft that was full of undead creatures like ghouls and vampires and zombies and skeletons and things. And they found a small sort of side area which was populated by a single banshee, who, upon being spooked by the players, let out her death wail, and nobody got over a 13.
Mm.
so, so that was basically session over because everybody's at 0 hit points. He would need someone to get a natural 20 and bounce up on 1 hit point and really save the day. But let's be honest, the likelihood of that happening is low when the Banshee then gets completely free reign to float around and finish the players off. So at the time, I used a bit of my DM rules breaking allowance and quickly smudged the DC to be 10, instead allowing one player because they all rolled that badly. A single player was left standing. Um, was able to use a potion of healing on the cleric the next turn, and the cleric was then able to heal somebody else up, and there was a nice domino effect that they all managed to get back up. But it was a really nice moment, a really stressful moment for me, where I was like the oh shit moment of I've just TPK'd everybody in a really cheap way. So be careful with that. But it is also very fun for your players to also go, oh my god, we're all going to die.
I personally have, well, I had a Banshee once prepared. Never
You
had the
did.
opportunity to unleash it on you all. You did not fall for the bait.
Mm.
And that,
Screaming in the hills near the camp was that.
yeah, screaming over what was a a former ancient battlefield. Um, and would have been she was a slight variant on the Banshee because you guys weren't baby players or baby characters at the time. You were decent-ish level, tier 2. I think probably by that point maybe.
Maybe level 3 or no, maybe level 4 or 5.
I
I
think
can't remember,
you
to be
were
honest.
well. You started at 3, didn't you? So
We did, yeah.
I think you're probably about 5 or 6 to be honest.
It
But
was
anyway,
definitely, yeah.
regardless, I didn't get the opportunity to do it. But she was going to be having fellow undead with her a little bit and had a whole lore thing that was behind it. But it was nothing. It was a on the road encounter that you did the smart thing of doing and not investigating the wailing that you heard over the nearby hill.
I'll be honest, as a player, I wanted to. It was a situation where we were escorting some people, so we couldn't really break away. I know the choice was always there, but the likelihood of the party breaking away when they were already on a different job, I think, was quite low. Um, they're a very interesting creature. They have some other interesting abilities. They can detect life. The Banshee can magically sense the presence of creatures up to 5 miles away that aren't undead or constructs. She knows the general direction they're in, but not their exact locations. Again, I've mentioned it already, incorporeal movement. The Banshee can move through other creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain. The standard sort of wording applies to this ability. She takes some force damage if she ends a turn inside an object. And
Typical ghosty stuff.
yeah, typical pass-through objects rules. You tend to see that sort of text on those sorts of abilities. A corrupting touch, a +4 to hit, 5 foot reach, melee attack dealing 3d6 +2 necrotic damage. So she'll get one attack a turn with that. So it's not overly terrifying in that respect. Although the necrotic damage could roll some quick maths there, a maximum of 20 if you weren't taking the average of 12. And then she's got another ability called Horrifying Visage.
Yeah.
Scary face from Pokemon, basically. Each non-undead creature within 60 feet of the Banshee that can see her must succeed on a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw or be frightened for 1 minute. The frightened target can repeat the saving throw at the end of its turn, so pretty standard fare there, with disadvantage if the Banshee is in line of sight, ending the effect on itself on a success. If the target's saving throw is successful, or the effect ends for it, the target is immune to the Banshee's horrifying visage for the next 24 hours, and that is something that the Banshee can keep using, but you'll typically probably use it at the start of the fight and then move on. I think a Banshee is a really interesting creature that you could build some mounting tension for if you were running a one shot, or like maybe a Halloween based one shot, or something where the players are investigating uh, people that have died of fright in a small village, and it turns out that people have been hearing a loud scream across the rooftops, and eventually the players realize it's a banshee and have to go and confront this spirit. You could build in other ways to do the encounter if it's some sort of ghost that is angry at the way it died, is seeking vengeance. A lot of opportunity for some nice narrative there,
Well, it's got
and some nice
some
roleplay
great lore
interactions.
in the text block itself. Some interesting things about it, like the fact that they're remnants of elves.
Mm,
That they're beauty hoarders, so they love things that are as beautiful as they once were. Lots of
mm,
that's great for going after adventurers who love to hoard gold and shiny things.
absolutely.
But yeah, it's a they are a very interesting monster for your low level parties, and you can beef them up again, as we've said before, and make them interesting later on as well, very easily.
Could. Oh yeah, super easy.
I think though we should go and move on to my option for this week. I went on the opposite end of the scale from our friend Rob here. I went for something with a high challenge rating of a nice, lovely, not too shabby 21. Something that I know seems fun to me, and that is I went for the Solar, or the Solar, depending on your pronunciation. And for the uninitiated, that is a very, very powerful angelic being, a celestial,
Yeah.
large. So don't go thinking absolutely enormous, but it is a large angelic entity, and it has a lot of fun powers, and they are, as far as I'm aware, the top celestial you can find within the monster manual.
Yeah, I think there's the three main celestial and angelic beings, nicely color coded as well, with the sort of pale whitish skinned one.
The
I always
Deva,
forget the name. Is that the Deva?
and Deva, however you want to pronounce it, yeah.
And the Planeta is the one with
Planetar's
the
there.
blue skin,
Mm.
and the Solar. The Solar always reminds me of Sanguinius. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, it's just a big Chad.
It's just there, isn't it? It's the big muscle Chad, big, large creature type. So you're talking probably 10 foot tall, i.e.,
Muscles,
Primarch
jacked,
Astartes height.
beautiful. It's like, yeah, it's and they're nothing to also I can't think of the phrase is, but nothing to frown at because
Mm,
they can they can mess you up too.
So
Being that they are resistant to the usual bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks, and radiant damage, which you would expect to some degree.
yeah,
Immune to necrotic and poison, and they can't be charmed, exhausted, frightened, or poisoned. Again, proving poison to be the worst damage type in
yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Least resisted, most immune.
Uh, its weapons attacks count as magical because it is an angelic being. So yes, any weapon it touches, it just does damage. It's got spells. Um, got its legendary resistances as well. Oh, resistance, sorry. Legendary actions. Doesn't have resistances. It has legendary actions.
You could
Uh,
certainly give it red legendary
you
resistance
could.
if you wanted it to be a more personalized boss. But
But one of the main reasons I really quite like it as well is what's called divine awareness,
I was
which
just
is
reading that.
the solar knows if it hears a lie, and some players have these tendencies to lie in situations when they're confronted with powerful things, and that would be very interesting. Um, and I quite like that non-combat little feature that it's got.
Oh yeah.
It means it could be very fun to use outside of combat as well. But for its actions and its legendary actions, it has pretty much it covers. It can pretty much do everything. It kind of covers all spots. It's got its spells, so it's innate spell casting. It's got a great sword attack. It's got a longbow, but a particularly special longbow, um, which if you have less than 100 hit points, you're going to make a con save or die.
just,
Um, just die.
just
Just
die.
die. So, not one for your low level party, believe it or not. You also have its sword, flying sword, sorry, which is a great little thing. It basically is a flying sword um, that it can be commanded using its bonus action. So it has a it doesn't need to fight you. Its sword can do it, and it can
That would be quite a good first round, actually. Like if you were going to instigate this thing as a boss, it could just be stood there, wings closed, just
yeah.
being like, you can beat this sword before you can even have a chance at fighting me.
You gotta beat
If you
my
can,
bonus action, and then you can
yeah,
come
love
fight
that.
me.
Yeah, that'd be good. Really good for if you wanted to instill that like air of arrogance that I
Mm.
feel is often quite stereotypical of angels.
Oh, of anything lawful good, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I love that it's got 150-foot flying speed.
Yeah, it is. This is the Flash. Is
Even the ancient red dragon didn't have that.
no,
Had like 80. 150-foot flying speed. Bearing in mind that a round of combat is 6 seconds, so you're covering 150 foot in 6 seconds.
yeah, they can fly pretty fast.
Yeah, just a bit.
Theoretically, they could go double that if they wish to dash. Uh, so like 300 foot in 6 seconds.
I think if it does that though, part of its action should be that it has to do that.
It has to dab. I think part of his action should be slowing down. He should be putting the
Yeah,
brakes on. Uh, it also can heal itself or heal things, but it can heal,
yeah.
which
Standard paladin style stuff.
yeah, I do. I am quite fond of giving monsters, homebrew monsters, an ability to heal or rejuvenate.
Yep.
Since I remember, I think the first one I sort of looked at it in was like trolls. I think they can do it. But yeah, I think if you burn them with fire, it stops. But
Yeah.
I always think it makes because you realistically could be doubling their hit points by doing that. You
Oh
won't. It's
yeah.
more like another half hit points basically. Um, but still,
I think I prefer that to damage resistances because they do a similar thing. things can resist the usual stuff, and which when you're a low level party and you don't have loads of magical weapons, resisting bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing is pretty harsh. But I like the idea of that they don't resist. I mean, this thing does because obviously, why not? It's challenge rating 21. But something that didn't resist damage but healed unless you do fire damage to it
Mm,
is pretty good because it's just a different way of doing the puzzle, the
mm,
damage puzzle. You're doing instead of having the 30 damage you might deal to it half to 15, it might be recovering 20 damage when it gets to its turn. I mean, you could argue definitely that that's nowhere near as good because you've got potentially 5, 6, maybe even more players hitting the thing that might only be recovering a small amount. But I just like it. It's versatile. It's versatile. Yeah, it's a different way of doing things.
agreed. Shall we get on to its legendary actions? Because that's quite fun as well. We talked about the speed it can fly. You know it can teleport too as a legendary action, 120
Yeah,
feet. So
you are not getting away from
you
this.
are not getting away from this. Your best bet might be to find a way off the whatever plane you're on. Get off it. That is probably your best bet if a solo is coming after you.
Probably
Like
something that we
shoot.
should have done on maybe the first episode when we started discussing legendary actions. But if you're a player and you've never DM'd before, a legendary action is something that the creature can do typically 3 times between its turn and its next turn, and it always must do it at the end of another player's turn. So it could have acted, then you might run up and hit it with a sword or blast it with a spell, and as your turn ends, it could just teleport to you because that's one of its legendary actions. Why not?
Yep. Uh, also, it has a couple of things it can do. Cost of 2 actions. So it's really only getting a teleport on one of these.
Yeah.
But it's got Searing Burst, so the Solar emits magical divine energy. Each creature of its choice within 10-foot radius must make a DC 23. 23, so like your rogues might, or you're probably at that level, at that point thinking at that's what level you're going to fight this will, but oof. But a DC 23 dexterity saving throw, taking 4d6 fire damage plus 4d6 radiant damage on a fail save or half on a success. So yeah, that'll hurt you as a legendary action.
Say it could teleport to you and let someone else have a turn and then just do that as its next legendary action is yeah, that's pretty interesting.
And then blinding gaze. If the solar targets one creature it can see within 30 feet, if the target can see it, the creature must make a DC 15 con saving throw or be blinded until magic such as Lesser Restoration removes the spell. Removes the effect, sorry. So,
So it's infinitely lasting until somebody uses,
if,
albeit a fairly common spell, but still, if nobody has that prepared in the fight,
yeah, you've got
you're
no
blinded
clerics.
till the end of the fight. Yeah, that's lesser restoration. Typically, find clerics, druids,
Mm,
rangers, I believe, can quite easily get that spell.
yeah, they do
Maybe
eventually.
bards, but um, it's a level 2 spell, so it's easy to get. But it's not something people typically prepare if they've got limited choice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting one. And the DC 15 con save is it does look quite low on the surface, but I think considering that it's a legendary action and you're not losing the Solar's turn to try something that might not work, there's always one player that has con as a dump stat, right?
Yeah. In our experience, anyway. And
You
there's
know who
all
you are.
you always got to get a few people who roll poorly as well. Again, in our party currently, you know who you are. Um, but yeah, a blindness that is it's essentially permanent until magic used to remove it is. We talked about Hunger of Hadar, blinding you whilst you're within it, blinded. That's effective if you again. Well, it's three. It costs 3 actions, but you stick that against your barbarian, they're gonna have to go reckless every time, right?
Mm. Not that it needs advantage to hit you. It's got plus 15 to hit on its great sword and plus 13 to hit on its bow. But still,
No, it's you.
blindness is good to do to players for sure.
I think it's just something that's really interesting that you could use outside of combat as well.
Yeah,
Play it's arrogant in itself, but play a lot of people's reaction to arrogance is to in themselves become arrogant and to
yeah,
get in that creature's face, that person's face, and it can just be like, oh, blind, beg, and I'll give you your eyesight back. Like,
yeah.
bend a knee and you'll get your eyes back, because it can give you your eyes back. So
That's true.
with healing touch.
Oh, as well. Just because we've not looked at its spells, it does have some spells.
Mhm.
We're going to be talking about will again, because at will, it can become invisible. Like, what? You're blind anyway. Detect good and evil, pretty standard fare for something that's basically a big flying paladin.
Mhm.
And then 3 a day, blade barrier, dispel good and evil, resurrection. Yeah, that's that 3 resurrections a day. Or 1 a day, commune and control weather. So that I think that's quite interesting because it just shows the scope of the things that they can affect. Um, and I like the idea of the resurrection spell being on it because they are entities of good.
Mhm.
Um, and as may or may not have happened in the past, they may be a solar or a different kind of angel, because there are others, aren't there, as we've discussed,
Mhm.
uh, that are put in front of the party as a fight that could be a challenge, as a rite of passage, or to gain the trust of the angel, or some sort of maybe earn um, passage, or
Respect,
a
trust.
boon of power, trust, like you've said, respect. They are quite arrogant, I feel. And then if one of the players dies in that fight, then that's fine because the angel
Yeah,
can just resurrect them. And why wouldn't it? Why would it not? It's lawful good.
yeah.
Um, you
It re-
succeeded in besting the angel. The angel would acknowledge the strength of the party as a whole and bring old Duncan back to life. Why not? Um,
or
yeah,
and if it really is uncertain, it can just then commune with its god to say, is this the right choice right now? You can call its
yeah.
boss.
it's it's got its boss on speed dial.
Well, I've used a diva or diva, however you want to pronounce it, for a such a thing as well. When we
Mm,
did the tomb of King
yes,
Ozer, and you guys went in there and you beat the crap out of a diva quite effectively. It did a bit of
divas
healing
are
on
the
you,
lower ones.
and hadn't actually uncursed somebody, I believe. Was that
I
them?
can't remember now.
I'm sure somebody was cursed. I feel like somebody was cursed. Unless I'm getting my campaigns mixed up.
Oh, it was. It took the gin weapon off Berenger because that was
That's right.
when we did the stupid decision of just leaving it there.
Hmm. And he got it back.
Yeah, I still don't really know what, as players of that level, what we would have maybe done with it. We'd have had to have just carry it with us or find somebody that could protect it. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Needless to say, it was a nice, it was a
It,
really good encounter.
it maybe wasn't the place to leave it. A weapon so heavily tied to the Jinn. Um, just in case the Jinn was interested in going in and getting it back, and that just happened to not go well for the diva in question, and meant you'd meet him later on.
Yeah, it was good. Good to meet the. What was his name? What was the Davis name? I feel like I remember it, but
So rad or something,
Sorad. It was Sorad or Sorad.
something like that.
He was Sorad.
That's bad.
Sorad, the big Chad.
He was a big Chad. I'd agree with that.
Who was he an angel of? Was it King Oza?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Servant of
Yeah, that
an
was it.
ascended king.
Yeah, made sense.
It was
Yeah,
his
no,
tomb
that
after
was
all.
good. I think was it a Planetar I threw at you guys, the blue one,
You threw a
because you were
Planetar against us,
your
yeah.
party was a bit of a. I think in the adventure that we were in, I think it was supposed to be a Devar, but by the time you guys got to it, because you can do what kind of do things in the order that you like, or whatever seems natural, it would not have been a challenge. So you got a Planetar instead.
It
I
went
did look at a Solar, but I decided against it.
it went well enough. We lost a person, and as a generous DM you are, I was allowed to revivify as a wizard. I think we had to scroll, didn't we? I might be able to do that anyway. Can I do that anyway? Can I never remember the rules for scrolls?
You had to scroll.
I just scroll.
Yeah,
I
we
definitely had to
played a
scroll.
little bit homebrew.
Like it's getting all mixed up now because of Baldur's Gate, man. Like
Yeah.
I'm like there's like scrolls of river fires everywhere, and anything can use them, whether or not they cast magic. But
See, this is the problem that I said Baldur's Gate could potentially have. It's going to make people think that the rules work slightly differently, but it is what it is. Most people play the scrolls the way that we played them anyway, in that um, spellcasters can typically do them, especially wizards, and yeah. But yeah, the Solar is a magnificent creature. That's for sure. Terrifying.
and muscular, beautiful in all
Sadly,
its form.
look at that 30 charisma. I've just noticed that.
Well, basically paladin with wings, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think he can go fly away off our screens, and we can move on to another topic. I believe we have two topics we've talked about,
Mhm.
talking about, and
Discuss.
one of them we've had on our list in previous for previous podcasts, and the other one I think I had it last week's, but we didn't talk about it. But I think we'll start with that one. I think it can lead into the other, and that is the I've put down as players versus DMs or DMs versus players. Um, it's not quite what I meant by the topic. I meant more along the lines of like, which do you prefer,
Right.
opposed to any sort of conflict between the two. We can cover conflict between the two, um, though I feel that may feed into the last topic more
It can do.
than this one. So this is
Sure.
more about which do you prefer, and it's probably your answer is probably going to be the same as mine. But which do you prefer and why, or which parts of either do you like more than the other?
Yeah, no, I think you've guessed my answer already, which is, of course, a little bit of both.
Mhm.
There's certainly things that I get from DMing that I don't get from playing, and there's satisfactions that I get from playing that you don't really get as a DM. As a player, you've got that one character to focus on. That character is your complete focus. So you get to really think about in huge levels of depth what their backstory is, what their motivations for doing whatever they're doing is, why are they with the rest of the group. And I will always say that you better have a reason, because characters shouldn't be in a group if they've got no reason to be there. That's a different topic. Why do they do what they do? What's their gain? What's their long-term and short-term goals? um, and you also get to really think about what you're doing to build this character within the rules, because there's progression for your character. Um, I love that side of really thinking about what I'm going to do when I level up. Um, so much so that I obsess about it. For certain characters, I will go back and back and back to spell lists, to the D&D Beyond app, to other apps or the books. I will just casually look through the upgrades that I'm going to get to choose. Probably got a lot to do with why I love warlocks, because of the invocations, because of the upgrade options, because of things like that. Um, so you really, really get that as a player. You get to have the reward of things like magic items. You get to see what your DM wants to help you achieve, how your player fits into the story, and then on top of that, as a player, you don't know what's going to happen. Um, so twists, um, reveals in the story, finding out suddenly that you're against a dark god of evil and lies that you had casually just written into your backstory of your character that his cultists murdered your family, and that's what set you on the course. And then just so happens that the DM has made that the big bad guy of the campaign. Um,
I
or you
can do
can
that.
work with your DM to achieve the same goal. So yeah, there's obviously so much I love about being a player. Um, I never get bored of that, but I do love DMing. I love to plan the what ifs for being a DM. So we would talk about player with like really solidly thinking about your progression. Um, when you're planning an entire campaign, you've got to think about five, six, four, maybe even seven or eight players at a push. At least for me, you've got complex party dynamics that you have to consider. You've got a whole entire world that, if it's homebrew, you need to have planned out names for every city. You got to come up with NPCs, think about names, and yeah, you can make a lot of stuff up on the spot. But then you've got to write that shit down because you're gonna forget that next session, and the note taker won't, um, or the person that, like me, just is enraptured by the sessions won't forget. Um, they might forget the name, but they won't forget that NPC, or they might remember the name. You get the joy of, as a DM, you get the joy of saying, "Oh, this is uh, I don't know, random NPC name that rhymes with some sort of phallic word," and all the players remember it in a very different way because you've accidentally named a DM, named an NPC with a name that rhymes with dick or something like that, and
Mm.
you have to think of that many names. You don't spot it until your players do, or if you've got other players that have really random brain chemistry and fill awkward moments of silence with the most randomest shit. Yeah, I love all that. It definitely comes with its own satisfactions. One thing that you really get as a DM, and it definitely took doing Curse of Strahd, or at least reading the book for Curse of Strahd, because
Yeah.
I feel that when I was finishing my first homebrew campaign, I already owned the Curse of Strahd book, and reading that really taught me a lot of things about how to finish my first campaign.
Mhm.
Is the looks of surprise and shock on your players' faces. I've made players cry for different reasons. Had a moment very much akin to "You Bow to No Man" in Lord of the Rings, and had two players in my Monday group like tearing up. It was a wonderful moment, and then I um, did some horrific things as of Strahd and committed grievous acts of emotional warfare, and made someone ugly cry. You know who you are. Yeah, so like I don't know. I don't think I could just do one or the other.
Yeah, agreed. I was a forever DM until basically until I met Rob. I think had I at that point done anything? Had my brother actually DM'd? I don't think he had. By I
You
don't.
must have done because you played Archie before me.
That's right, I did. So he did have a go, and that didn't go particularly well. So
It might have been more down to the group from what I know of it than
yes, that was
anything
probably
else.
that didn't go to plan, and yeah, other things, but but yeah, I uh, I agree. I don't have a favorite. Sometimes when I'm playing, I wish I was DMing, and sometimes when I'm DMing, I wish I was playing. Um, yeah, I love creating a character and figuring out his backstory and what your plans are with him and how you want to play him and getting into the headspace of that character. And it's a lot. Some players will always have trouble just doing. It's going to sound like I'm talking down to players, but some players will have trouble just doing that,
Yeah.
um, building that backstory and that character, and then getting into that headspace. For me, I do that. I will think quite a lot about that character over however long it is before I actually sit down and play him. But it is nowhere near to the amount of thought or prep that goes into preparing for a campaign, especially as mostly I do homebrew.
Mm,
Like the amount of time and effort that I put into just thinking about lore and what happens if they explore this or they want to look into this. And I did that a lot with the last campaign. I came out to the point now where I'm trying to be more relaxed with my current one,
yeah.
but there's still a lot of like thought into like, well, if they go this way, I want to do this. If we want to go that way, I want to do that. I want to make sure these characters exist. Well, each NPC to me is just like a player character. I want to make sure that that character is not it's really 2D. They're thought out. They have a personality. They're not just like, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just background characters. They're menus with like dialogue options of you, but
Yeah.
like sometimes
Sometimes the results of that character, the interaction with the player character, is goes in ways that you never at all envisaged it would. Like
no.
on Friday when we met Sven.
Yeah. Sven was Sven was interesting because I'd been thinking about Sven being a Goliath. I was thinking about how I wanted Goliath to be in the world that day, and about a story that I thought would be really fun to have there if you guys wanted to go down that route.
Yeah.
Being that we're trying to do a little more non-traditional campaign, leaving a lot of the story direction up to the players, and
Mm,
me just sort of doing a lot more improv on the fly. Um, but Sven was just I thought I had, and I'll make it a reality now. And then I can sprinkle maybe him in at some other point as well, or at least references to him.
I need to get
But
my hat back off him for one.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but sometimes, yes, you will create a character. Maybe you prepare it beforehand, or you do it in the moment, and they won't be particularly 3D. They'll be very bland. And
Mm,
it's only through the player's interactions do they suddenly come to life
yeah.
in that moment. And sometimes the players will want to have an interaction or try and have an interaction with an NPC that is, a waste of time for everybody.
Yeah.
And I used to be, I would just improv it on the moment. Now I think I'm much more on the line of, dude, it's just it's just a thing. You wouldn't if it was a video game, there'd be no interact button. It's literally
Yeah.
just a background. It's a GTA character on the street. It's not a. We did technically have it in this past session on Friday, where we had these teleportation circles that are the basic mass transit for the city that you're in, and they all have stewards tending to them. I'm not going to
Yeah.
come up with the entire roster of staff that works for these teleportation circles. And yeah, one of our players decided to interact with it, and I was just like, dude, it's not worth it. It's not a dude. I'm not. He doesn't have a name. Um, and being that a lot of what we're doing now is improv, it's a different perspective on DMing. That it's definitely going to feel a lot more fresh for a lot longer than
Yeah.
than it normally would. So I think I'll be having less urges to play. And I think with sometimes when I'm playing as well, I get this urge halfway through playing a character where I'm kind of like, oh, but I kind of fancy playing this now.
Yeah.
Kind of want to switch off. And when that happens, you don't want to do it because you're in the middle of something. If you're DMing, you're doing that all the time. You're switching characters constantly. You're
Yeah.
getting that variety in what you want. There wasn't, to be fair, in Strad Emmerich. I was happy to play all the way up till the boot in the face, um,
Oh,
and then his replacement. I think his replacement I played enough. I think
yeah.
he was a little less three-dimensional. Uh,
It's always the perfect character to bring in when there was. It's not like you were right at the end of the campaign, but I think at that point you were like
mm,
2/3 of the way through.
yeah,
Maybe even 3/4, depending on like what you guys chose to do thereafter and how quick you were with certain interactions and certain events.
yeah,
Um, and you didn't need him to get to know a lot of NPCs. He needed to get to know the party enough to fit in, and he absolutely did. And you still had some really wonderful moments with Tor, like with the big tree. Um,
mm,
Again, I won't go into too much detail, just purely for the fact of the spoilers for Curse of Strahd.
mm,
Um, and you had some really nice interactions with Strahd, and I think one of the good things about that is although because we discuss things a lot anyway, so you'd made it quite clear that you didn't need to have as complex a route in the world with Tor as
no,
with Emmerich because you
yeah,
didn't need to. You didn't have a whole backstory you needed to explore. You were well aware that you were coming to the point where you were winding up to work towards the end of the campaign.
mm,
Um, so you built a character that worked to that.
I did.
Um, and again, I think if it had got to a point where Tor was killed, um, you'd have probably I kind of imagine it as like it down a little bit each time, maybe. You probably would have done that a
Yeah,
little even less so.
yeah,
But I still think there'll definitely be a good base level where you'd still put the right amount of thought into it, and you'd still build a very much detailed and depthful character.
yeah, yeah, and that's fun, and it's just imagine if you leave evidence play, the DM has to do that a lot for a lot of characters. Uh,
Don't
well,
talk to me about remembering accents.
accents,
Not, do not talk to me about remembering accents. That is really hard for me to do.
something we
And I
should,
did Kaliningrad for so long that I end
yeah,
up just kind of going with that generic kind of Polski Russian
hmm.
dialect accent, um, which I suppose not really you shouldn't really do, but
I mean,
it's
yeah,
what it is.
like there's this assumption, and in part maybe it's the Matt Mercer effect, that DMs believe they have to then do voices and characters in a particular way. You don't. Like, it's
No,
just the case. You don't. If there are easier, you can still do inflection,
yeah, yeah.
and you can still change little things about the way you speak, the words you choose to say.
The presence of a character is quite impactful in that respect as well. Like
Hmm.
the way you describe. Always, if you're not great at doing accents, I mean, this is I suppose broaching from talking about our preferences to maybe a little bit of advice, but um, is be mindful absolutely of how those NPCs present themselves, and the voice is only a part of that. Um, and you can build that personality in other ways. But I do like to do voices. I'm good at some, bad at others. I think picking a voice that you're not great at sometimes for certain characters can add to a comedic effect.
Sure.
Um, Not
Uh,
to be done at the wrong moments.
yeah, and if you're a player, if you know you're going into I would recommend it mostly with a one shot. You don't want to be playing a silly, stupid character um, for an entire campaign, but
Yeah,
having well, for example, we had a bard with a player that decided he was going to do a very stereotypical French accent,
yeah,
and it was great and it was funny. Luckily, it was only like a two shot, but and he wasn't in it a lot due to technical issues. But it was it's a choice to make, but it's funny and it works in the
yeah.
moment. And we made it work in the world because I thought it was hilarious that um, the French accent didn't exist in that world, and so it was just something he'd made up.
Did we not decide that it was like trauma related,
I don't remember. Maybe. Yeah.
or that it was like being brought up by a set of parents that were putting on the act of
Hmm.
being exotic for their
Yeah.
cafe or something? I can't
And
remember.
he got stuck in that sort of that mindset. Yeah. Uh, but
Yeah, that
yeah.
is one thing for players. Definitely, like have a conversation with the DM. Don't feel forced to make your accent match the rest of your race, but be aware that if you're putting on, let's say, an Australian accent for your character, and there's not many other places that you might have hailed from. So if you go there and uh, they're not speaking Australian, it might be a little bit weird. Um, and in my first campaign, um, although I think it was fantastic, one of my players was playing a tabaxi, and this is way back before COVID, way before some of us have moved away. So we used to play in person.
Hmm.
And the first session rolls up and he introduces his character. And funnily enough, he also did it in a French accent. Um, it was a good French accent, or at least for a Yorkshire man like myself, it sounded quite good.
Hmm.
Probably sounded terrible to a French person. Um, but it was great. It gave us all a chuckle at the time, but then I just remember saying, "You bastard! Now I have to make all the Tabaxi French because they only live in one community." And he
Yeah.
knew that going in because we'd had a conversation about his character and where the character would have would have been from. And um, but I had fun with it. I made all the Tabaxis French, and
Yeah. I
it
always
organically improved.
I tend to always go with dwarves being Scottish for some
Yeah,
reason. It is an accent I can do really easily. So like all the various different Scottish accents, I can sort of some of them I can fall into quite easily.
I wonder where that came from because I know it's the case in World of Warcraft, and
Hmm.
that's an old game now. It's been going on a very long
I
time.
think it's just maybe a little bit of a stereotype, because
Yeah,
like if we go back to like Lord of the Rings, they go back to when you look at Lord of the Rings,
yeah.
he's doing an I don't quite know what accent that Gimli has. But it's somewhere between Welsh and Scottish.
I think it has vibes. Yeah.
He's Welsh, so there is that in there, but there's definitely
Mm,
Scottish vibes to it. And I
yeah,
just really think it went well. I like
yeah.
um, I like
It's a good
the
it's a good accent to do if you can do it right. And there are some quite obvious different ones as well.
mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. That's the go-to is doing your Glaswegian Scottish
Yeah.
accent. Um, but yeah, I pretty much any world I ever create, the dwarves are always going to be Scottish. I tend to lean on certain accents, and I think for me it's just a way of helping players that suddenly who become used to that. So you guys will always know if you're talking to someone Scottish, it's straight away. Oh, it's probably a dwarf.
Yeah.
Um, I tend to lean on Irish a lot for gnomes.
Oh yeah, you do.
Um, long story why that is, but the reasoning behind why it is, um, and into the world of Nuri that we played in our first campaign,
Ah,
uh,
fair.
and then there is I think most elves just tend to be kind of that sort of almost received pronunciation, Queen's English, um,
Uh,
very posh thing with elves. Um, uh,
Refined.
Refined, and then of course you got your Cockney, which is your orcs,
Oh yeah.
because that's just Warhammer that's kind of
I think
done that.
Warhammer definitely did. I mean, everybody loved the old Space Marine game. Trying
Space
my hard not
Marines.
to say, yeah, I was trying not to do it. Oh yeah. No, it's and it's in the Warhammer community. I know you're not as much part of it,
Mm,
but
just
it's
a lore
it's
fan.
it's a bit of a cringe thing when orc players speak in the Cockney dialect and also use all the orcish words like gubbins and dacker and that sort of stuff. And Yeah, it's almost like if you start doing that to somebody, it's almost like rickrolling somebody.
She's come in with
So,
a voice change just to do the right sort of Space Marine actual uh, speaking through a helmet noise, basically.
yeah, if I was playing Warforged, I would love to download some sort of voice change software.
Oh, I think it'd be very annoying. So
That vox crackle.
maybe you would love to do it, but I think after a while, yeah,
This goes back to being one-shot characters or
yeah,
short
one-shot
adventure characters
characters
versus
versus
campaign characters.
yeah. I think with go try and go even back to our original topic. If I'm going to play up as a player, I do take into consideration voice sometimes, a lot of the time, but it's one of the last things I actually think about is what I'm going to do with the voice. Um, I'm
Sometimes leave it till last minute.
yeah, I remember with when I played me little gnome chef Dwayne. I think I literally came onto the call and I was like, haven't decided what accent I'm gonna do, but this is the guy, and I think our player Chris was like, I think you should go with the Cockney, kind of inspired by Andy Serkis in King Kong thing. I believe that's what he was thinking.
Maybe.
Because sometimes it
It's
just
a
to
while
come
ago, is that?
uh, it's just to come up with it at the last second because it is the least one of the least important things. It depends on the person. Some people really find it a good thing to get into characters have a good voice. I find a good backstory works for me better. And I like the same thing to some degree with when I'm DMing. I like to have a good backstory for my world. I love to build that lore and I love to write that stuff. I love world building and telling stories. And I admit after Strahd, I wanted to DM again. I was like, I'm
Mhm.
ready to jump back in and start telling stories because sometimes when you see the look on your players' faces and the way they react to some things you throw at them, and when you can surprise them, and like yeah, people maybe come to expect a good twist now from me. Otherwise, I'm less in control now than ever with it, so less likely to be twists. I'm still going to try and squeeze them in,
Oh,
but
you'll find a way, I'm sure.
uh,
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite parts as a DM. You don't get it as a player as much,
no.
because I think a lot of the players are so focused on their own characters and the story, and we do focus on each other's characters, but to a lesser extent. Whereas because everybody's so focused on what you're telling as a DM, when you do build a situation that has the right tension and the right
Mm,
shock value or the right twist or the right kind of like, I suppose it's shock value again, but like revealing something, and you see your players react whether you're in person or whether you're looking at a bunch of cameras on Discord or Teams or Zoom or whatever it is you use. Yeah, I don't think you can beat that. I still think though, if you push me to make a decision, I probably would pick player, but it would only beat it by a hair.
if you push me to make a decision, you'd have to really push me, gun to my head. I'd, I would probably gun to my head would choo- I'd probably choose DM. I think. I think like, there's still a few. It might just be because there's parts of me that still want to do. If it's still things I want to do as a DM,
Yeah,
I feel like with the player, there's always creative things that you can do, but I
yeah,
don't feel like I have the things I want to. I've yet to do this. I really want to do this. There's still things I kind of want to do with DMing, with DMs, being a DM, being a dungeon master. Um,
yeah.
that I haven't done yet. But with a player, yeah. I mean, you could argue like my brother often would probably argue is he hasn't played every single class yet, and he wants to make sure he plays every single class. Doesn't mean as much to me. Class is secondary.
There aren't many classes I haven't played now. I mean, obviously there are many, many, many subclasses I
Mm.
haven't played. Many warlocks yet to build.
Mm,
Jokes aside, but I, I think it depends. I think I'm always going to love DMing though. So
mm,
and maybe it's just because I'm still in that kind of time period of a month or so, maybe 2 or 3 months after finishing a almost a year-long campaign.
mm,
So I'm probably still enjoying getting back into the player's seat. Although I think I probably, because I play in multiple games, I
mm,
probably have that a little bit less anyway because I get to play. I don't think I would. Well, I just flat would refuse. To be fair, I wouldn't DM in both. I wouldn't want to run multiple adventures at one
no,
time.
that'd be
Um,
difficult. I think because one of my things that I do would love to do at some point is would be to run another pre-written campaign.
yeah,
I think it does, for as we said, whichever episode it was, but we said it's a great place to start for new DMs is pre-written
yep.
campaigns. But it's also great for time. Like it doesn't take as much as your week to plan it. Um, Not that I can say that I've been doing a lot of planning at the moment, having been a little bedridden, but it doesn't consume as much as your time doing a pre-written thing, and I think that gives you. It's where you've talked about it with Strahd, whereas like you did this pre-written thing, and you saw that actually there was so much option to be creative within that box, and I'm
Yeah,
very interested to see what that being in that box is like.
I think it almost would catch me out sometimes as well because I would be expecting the book to provide an answer to something. It happened more than once,
Mm,
and it just simply didn't. So it's that would be the criticism is that you don't always know where your opportunities for creativity are. So you have to be adept at finding them. Um, some of it is very, as long as you're reading the book ahead. Sometimes it's very, very clear. Um, but for example, with the Castle Ravenloft being as huge as a map as it is, I didn't read absolutely every room until I was confident that you guys were going there. And because of the way the book lays it out as well, you get a nice bit of text to read to the players. Usually it's fairly on theme. Um, but it was like, there was one bit, and I've said it before, where it's like, through the broken windows, the players can see the murky sky
yeah,
and hear the rain pattering against the walls. And I'm like, it's raining! When did you tell me it was raining?
not never mentioned it raining.
Yeah, and the book assumes that it's nighttime or something like that. And if you're just kind of reading it, um, it will totally dislodge you
Mm,
from where you are in your mind at the time. And then there are times where you just need to think on your feet, and you just need to go, yes, there is definitely some windows there that you can break in, even if the book isn't clear one way or the
mm.
other. So you just make that choice, and that bit's not too difficult. I don't think I would ever feel the need to be ultimately rigid with a book campaign, but it is absolutely a lifesaver doing something like the Curse of Strahd.
I think you
Now,
were lucky doesn't even seem like the right word because it wasn't luck, but you
fortuitous?
fortuitous that you chose that book and you are a lover of vampires, I guess. The
There is that.
but it yeah, you were lucky that it is considered one of the best pre-written
Yeah.
campaigns to ever come out of Wizards of the Coast. Whereas others are less interesting or less um, open, or they'll have less room for you to make adjustments on the fly like that. Um,
The
and
one criticism that I've heard from other DMs, one of the DMs in my Monday group,
mm,
being that we've played through some shorter stuff set in the Sword Coast,
mm,
um, and now we are still not very many sessions in because we're doing it on a Saturdays, and we don't always do it every weekend. We're working through Storm King's Thunder, I think it's called.
yeah,
Um, which is great so far. No complaints from my side, but I know from what they've said that when you are trying to um, offer lore about anywhere in the Sword Coast, the books typically say refer to the Sword Coast Adventure Guide, which you might not even own.
Yeah,
Um, or it's just assumed that people know the lore because it's the Sword Coast, it's where Baldur's Gate is, it's where
there is a lot of him.
Water's Deep is. And it's so if you go to the city, Water's Deep, is that the name of it?
Yeah, it's what deep Baldur's
Yeah,
Gate.
yeah, Waterdeep, yeah.
Never went to it.
Yeah, it's Waterdeep was the one I was thinking of. It's where we ended up going.
It's one of the large ones. Large, maybe the largest one. I don't know.
It was yeah, it was great. It was a good city, but like we didn't explore loads of it purely because it was like we didn't know it.
No, you didn't.
And I think that's what Strahd has over other stuff is because it's you just have the villages and the towns that are there, and it's set in its own kind of self-contained place
Hmm.
that it works very very well, and you don't have to do research outside of the book, apart from maybe a little bit of lore on whatever deity a cleric in the group might want to use.
Hmm. I imagine that Wild Beyond the Witchlight is probably quite similar.
Mm.
But I think, but I believe that it's set in a Feywild domain of dread
Oh, is it? I didn't
or
know that.
something like that. It's set in another like separate pocket dimension,
Like,
demi
yeah, like
plane,
a
whatever
demi
you want
plane.
to whatever you want to call it. I believe it is. I don't own it, so I can't say. Um, I don't really got to buy the pre-written stuff because the other one I ever bought I was a bit like, okay, so this is lack of choice of freedom. I feel it was very like
Mm.
this straight line is what you're going to follow.
I think you need to do your research with them and look at what people have said about them. And it don't really matter if you're going to spoil yourself if you're the DM
No.
because you can watch like there's lots of content out there to watch on videos and YouTube and
Hmm.
what
But we drastically went off course with that topic,
a little bit, yeah.
and it's what I like to see, and I don't mind. But it has meant that we have gone a bit long, so we shall skip our final topic and add it to try and do it another week,
I think we'll
as
do
we
it
have
next time.
done every single week so far, and we'll call it an end here. So I would like to thank everybody who has tuned in and who is listening for listening or tuning in or watching. This will be available on YouTube on Friday, so tomorrow, unless disaster strikes, it will be on there. So you can check it out on youtube.com// awkwardly big dice. Also check us out on all our various socials: Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. All awkwardly big dice, except for Twitter, we have to remove the C. And like our videos, subscribe to us on YouTube. It'd be great to see a little more traffic through on YouTube. And we will chat to you all next time.
All
This
right.
time
Thank
next
you for
week.
listening. See you next week.